Again, welcome everybody that's here. Welcome to everybody listening by recording. If you're listening by recording, I still want you to do the same thing. Come up with a couple of questions about the Module 5 topics. But of course, you can't answer it and get immediate feedback from me as you could live, but you can send it to me by course message or text. And I keep putting my texting number, which is my Google Voice phone number. You can also do a voice call using that. Keep putting that up there in the course. You see it over and over again, all the announcements, course grading comments, all kinds of things. I put it in, all of the course messages. Welcome, Tanya. Thanks for coming. Legal malpractice is interesting because technically legal malpractice is not at all the same as an ethical violation in a way as far as the procedure for it. The facts, though, that give rise to a legal negligence or malpractice action, though, you could argue are based on lack of diligence, so that technically speaking, you might say, well, the same facts that resulted in a lawsuit against the lawyer certainly were at least somewhat unethical in terms of not using diligence. On the other hand, the professional responsibility rules, which do require that a person be capable and effective on that area of law, perhaps are not violated by somebody who makes a gross error. Do you see where I'm coming from? You can make a gross error. I guess I would analogize it to traffic or something. A person could become distracted and go over the center line even though they were really attempting to be a good driver, and but did something wrong and over the center line that caused somebody else to swerve onto the, even though there's no accident, somebody else had to swerve into the onto the other side past the roadway. Technically is careless driving, which is a crime. In most states anyway. I think every state basically, if they have to swerve off the traveled portion of the roadway, it's, you know. But of course, was it unethical or was it just a big goof? Good question. Same thing with a big goof on a legal practice. Most of the time, if it was an honest mistake, but a bad mistake, it could result in a lawsuit without resulting in a ethics investigation by the Professional Responsibility Board people. Consequences resulting from unethical conduct by a paralegal. Typically not by a professional board, typically more by the attorney in terms of job prospects and so on, and, you know, that kind of a thing. Although they could, if they're in an association, they could be removed from an association, voluntary association. This one is sticky, obligation to report on ethical conduct. Which unethical conduct would a paralegal know about, typically by the attorney that they work for or with. And then, of course, describe what makes a paralegal competent and professional. 2 questions. These are, I guess I was going to say they're not terribly difficult topics, but I'd say in some ways they are if you go into depth. The obligation to report. If there's more attorneys, you may not report directly to a professional board. May report instead to the senior attorney in hopes that they would report it to a professional board or would take law firm action against it if it doesn't merit that. But it would be real difficult to report your own boss or supervisor. But if it's a gross intentional act of misconduct, maybe you'd have to. Okay. Jessica Dooley asks, if your notary stamp is expired but the notary still uses it, what would the punishments be? I assume this falls under malpractice or at least violation of ethics. Good question. I suppose it matters if it's just the stamp itself or if it's actually the license. And I know I'm splitting hairs, but isn't that what a lot of law is about? If the person failed to get a new stamp and put the notary expiration date on it in pen, stamped it with the wrong stamp and then changed the expiration date, I'm not sure that would be wrong. Does that make sense, Jessica? I think it's more of a, but what if the person is no longer a notary, legally a notary, then under the state statutes, the person has to, any state I've heard of, and actually I don't know, I thought Minnesota went with a perpetual notary. I could be wrong with that. I was a notary for years when it was time limited. The last time I was a notary, it was still a 6-year commission. So I could not notarize something today. I do not have a notary. But if I had notarized something after my 6-year expiration, that would have been illegal and could be punished, I suppose, as a misdemeanor or sued for it, I suppose. For an attorney to do that would have been an attorney who falsely notarizes something. That would also be an act of misconduct and could be investigated by the professional board. A paralegal, if the paralegal did it and did not tell the truth to the attorney, I suppose the attorney would fire the person, but the document would have to be notarized again. I don't know the answer to that, Jessica Dooley. Of the next question would still be legally notarized with an expired stamp. My guesstimate is that if the notary commission was valid, using the wrong stamp could be cured or fixed. Does that make sense? Yeah. Because, yeah, you do, in order to make everything look nice, you have to not only get a new commission for the new period of time in your state, but you also have to, I believe, register it. In most states, I think you'd have to register it with the county, have a copy of the commission there, I believe, and then also have a correct stamp normally. But it depends on the state. My state used to not have to have personalized stamps. We used to be able to use well, not we, because I guess I wasn't a notary at the time, but there were still generic stamps, and then you could just put your commission date on it in pen. In my state, we used to have, there was a really fancy stamper, I remember, that the previous lawyer had. It was sort of like a seal thing, and it didn't have a commission date. It was just generic, and then the person would have to fill in pen their name, the name of the notary, and all that. So I think that's a state issue. focused attendance questions, attention questions. Have I told you guys the last keys story? Because I don't want to repeat it in a single section of class. I mean, unless you've had me before. Basically, the lost keys story is, I guess it's not a story, it's more of a challenge. My challenge is to learn how to focus better. And most people don't literally do this, but they can imagine doing it. I would actually do it. Either mess up your own house and lose something on purpose. Not a set of keys that you need, but let's say have somebody hide something that you really don't need that bad, but you'd like to have it, and they hide something. Or ideally, you go to a really messy room in somebody's messy house, and they've lost something, or they've hidden something, and then you have to look for it. And if you're looking for lost keys in a messy room, you will probably memorize 20 things or more about that room as you do it without trying to memorize. If you just went in the same room and you weren't looking for anything but just trying to memorize the same period of time, let's say 5 minutes, you're just looking at things in the room and trying to memorize. You're probably only going to memorize like 7 things based on memory science tests that people have taken. Why would it be so much of a multiple of that, almost 3 times as many? It's because when you're actually looking for something, your brain focuses better, puts things into recall memory. So if you are looking for answers to specific questions you have, any kind of a presentation or reading process, you're reading and skimming, you will remember what you read better, you will remember what you listen to better. It's based on this loci. Basically, if you went into somebody's messy room, a friend of yours, you would know whether their in-laws were in favor, whatever, because you would remember whose picture was where. If you went into my house, you'd say, well, I saw that you had some nephews up there on top of the piano. Their picture was here. Where's your nieces over there? You know, you would probably memorize color of my seat cushions and whether they're the same color on top of the cushion or where it doesn't show. Do you see where I'm coming from? You'd probably remember the table, whether we had a table lamp or a floor lamp. It's amazing how much you'll learn if you're actually looking for something, and how hard it is to learn when you're not looking for anything for yourself. You're just hoping somebody else comes up with something. Super short week coming up for Module 6. We're all done on Tuesday, November 10th. There is such a thing as an incomplete, but I urge you not to do an incomplete because they're real difficult. Most of my students are going to be starting new classes on the 11th, so trying to complete something while you're starting new classes is not very good. So unless you have a terrible problem between now and next Tuesday, please don't try for an incomplete. Just get whatever you can get done through a week from today. Questions or problems about that? It is a problem for some folks, which I realize, but you have to know if you go to the student lounge in your 2 sections, I teach 2 sections of this, either section, you're going to find out that almost everybody that you're taking classes with is in the same boat you are. There are no, basically these classes are not taken by people who have lots of leisure time at their disposal. These classes are taken by people who have full-time jobs and also other responsibilities. Lots of my students, most of my students have children, or if they don't have children at home, they have elderly parents they have to look in on, because a bunch of my students are old enough that their parents are quite elderly, and a bunch of my students are also young enough that they still have kids at home. Some of the kids having to take school from home. So there's just lots and lots of going on in their lives. So if I gave easy incompletes to everyone who wanted them, I could end up doing 20 incompletes, which I just can't. It's just not workable. This is interesting because when you go to Lexis as opposed to just doing web-based open web research, you can find out that some of the cases that you think are good law have been reversed by the court systems. If you get stuck on Lexis skills, there's a number of different things you can do. One of them is to call me, which is if you don't know what you want, always call me because I can sort out what you need. If you know what you want, but you just can't get to it, then you can certainly use Lexis. Like you say, well, I really know for sure that I want to know what to click on to get the case information for what happened to this case. Yeah, Jessica Dooley has a tip too. If you search under secondary sources in Lexis, it will cite primary sources to help direct you to where you want to be. Yes. Very good. Very good tip. Here's some reflection questions. What is your duty to report an issue of competence with respect to your supervising attorney? It's hard for me to imagine in a way how did they become really not competent, but if they become impaired, then they become less competent. One clever attorney, well, two of them, there are only two. I recall a couple of instances where attorneys had severe alcohol problems. I didn't have to deal with them directly, I suppose, with the problems. I dealt with the consequences of problems a couple of times because one of the attorneys kept asking for delay after delay, and I couldn't figure out why the judge was giving the person delay. It seemed like favoritism to me. I was not happy with it, but I could later on find out the reason. But I think that the judge was just kind of enabling the attorney, if that makes sense. How many know the term enabling? Trying to help the attorney, but it was no help because it just made it easier for the attorney to stay drunk. Questions, problems? Enabling seems like a nice thing to do, but sometimes being perfectly helpful that way is actually, in the long run, hurts. There are programs that will help lawyers who are impaired due to alcoholism or mental, emotional issues and things like that. My state has it, Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, and there's other states that have either that title or other titles, other types of help. And if it can be caught early enough, maybe the lawyer can go back to full-time practice and be able to handle it very well. But it's not advisable for you to just sort of let it go, because the client may be harmed. And in some cases, the client is not harmed because the person keeps getting delayed, but the justice system gets harmed, or the other side. I had to be very pushy to get a case done against an impaired attorney because, as I said, the judge was catering to that attorney, and I had to be very insistent. Review the signs of impairment as you go through this ethics opinion in the readings. Absences is not a problem with attorney. They're absent a lot because they've got to go to meetings, court. Now, of course, not as much going to court. They're doing a lot of remote court through Zoom and things like that. But unexplained absences, scheduled appointments, that's very hard on employees because employees reassure somebody, yes, the attorney will be here. Then the attorney's not there. Fails to appear, that's a tremendous problem. Does anybody know why being late or not appearing is a tremendous problem for clients? It's not a complicated answer. Client may lose the case. And you'd say, well, why would the judge be mean to the client when it was the attorney's fault? Well, the judge may not have any choice. Like a missed deadline, a judge may not be able to fix it. Due to law. And the result has to be, in order for the client to be made whole, the client is going to have to sue and hope the attorney was not late in his malpractice premium. So these are bad patterns. And of course, some folks say, well, my boss is always like that with some of these things. If the pattern changes, though, I mean, let's say an attorney is always like this. Let's say these two. The attorney specifically hires people to help with this defect. If this is just a constant defect, it may not be a red flag. But this person is going to be difficult to work with. Hopefully they're paying their employees a premium amount if they're in that situation. Neglects mail or timely return of calls. So if you end up working for somebody and you have to keep apologizing for them, that becomes a job that's no fun to do. I hope they pay people, I hope that attorney pays very well. One of the things you can do with these is just organize better. And you say, well, why is that my problem? It isn't your problem, but if you work for the person and you want to keep working for them instead of having them leave the practice, yeah, you would probably try to hyper-organize so that the person gets this stuff done. Questions or problems? Tanya is asking, what would you make you feel like enough is enough to report an attorney? When it either does or is very likely to either hurt the client or the justice system. How's that? And maybe I'm overdoing it. I don't, it's a judgment call. An employee would probably try to work with the attorney. If the other one is, if the paralegal has to be aggressive rather than assertive, it's sort of like over. You might have to just, one of the things you might have to do is just walk away. You might have to quit. Has anybody talked to you folks about being assertive rather than passive or aggressive? Okay, it's that balance where you don't want to be a doormat or let things just slide, but you don't have to. You don't want to go on the other side and get in people's face and start hollering. Okay, so no, you should not be. One of the judges was alleged to be under the influence of alcohol in court. I noticed that judge was hungover, but hungover is how a person feels the next day when they're, they have a bad headache, they're owly, difficult, but they're not under the influence. Does that make sense to folks? And the cure for that, frankly, was one of the really best lawyers ran against that judge and won. But the judge also did some other unethical things. Basically, tried to interfere by calling the judge on his own divorce, I guess. That's what he did. And you're not supposed to telephone call the judge on a case, even if you are a judge, if it's your case. You're supposed to make your only presentation in open court with the other side having full access, if that makes sense. But anyway, that judge lost in the election, and but I never noticed. But of course, I was a naive young man necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily have noticed if he had been subtly under the influence or something. But it seemed to me he was hungover when he was in court, not drunk. But these are bad patterns. These can happen. Law can be an extremely stressful situation for people, and some people everybody acts badly to stress at some time, but if it becomes a pattern and hurts a client, something has to be done. Hopefully not with a paralegal having to confront a person aggressively, but just simply assertively saying, shouldn't you talk this over with another attorney? This looks like a big problem for me. Would you, this situation, it looks like you're not going to be able to handle this case because you've got another case on Tuesday, and the judge on this one said that this one can never be postponed again. And you have not been in the office. You haven't really done anything the last several weeks. I don't really know what's happening. It's difficult to work for you. You never return the phone calls, etc. If you can talk to the person reasonably and have them bring in another attorney on a case, then maybe you don't have to report it. But if it's going to affect the client and the client's going to lose the case, I don't know how you can avoid it. malpractice is different because it's a different procedure. It is lack of diligence, but if it's lack of diligence and it results in actual harm, it's probably going to be a lawsuit rather than an ethical violation as far as how it's treated. An ethical violation could be malpractice, but not always. A lawyer, let's say a lawyer steals money from the trust account. That's not malpractice, that's just theft, okay? Trust account being an account that they keep for clients. And again, these are the same cases we talked about earlier a little bit. We're going to look them up. Negligence of a paralegal shows a deficiency in the supervision by a lawyer. An individual holding themselves out as an attorney could be liable for malpractice. Naturally, what is the problem with that? The biggest problem with that, of course, is that unless the individual has some wealth, some cash, bank accounts, or whatever, it's going to be difficult collecting from the person. Attorneys in many states are not required to have malpractice insurance. I think there's a national trend asking for them not only to report whether they have it, but also to actually have to buy it. Any questions or comments about that? I always had it when I was an attorney. Well, I paid for it for 27 years. I never used it, and since I never got sued, I did call the company if I had any questions whatsoever about anything that I thought could result in a lawsuit if somebody thought that I had done something wrong, but I never actually got sued and they never had to pay a claim. So I was very happy with that. But there are situations every lawyer gets into where it's worthwhile calling. And that's one of the things, if something goes wrong, even if it's not the lawyer's fault, I would encourage the lawyer to call the company. Why? Because some things, they have ways of mitigating things, making things work better in a crisis. Urge the attorney to call the malpractice company. You know, in a couple of instances, just a little advice, they have in one case, a non-client was threatening me, which is ridiculous because I had no responsibility to this person, never on the client list, and I could prove it. But instead of just ignoring it, I contacted my company, and they settled the person's hash very fast. and they also gave me good advice on what to write in terms of the letter and so on. You know, you get hot under the collar when it's when somebody makes a threat or demand. Do you see where I'm coming from? The other thing is, and I will say this about malpractice coverage. I had the best malpractice coverage in the state at the cheapest rate. Why? Number one, I told the truth, the whole truth, every year to my company when for renewal. They have a very detailed renewal application every year. And you might say, well, why didn't you lie to your company to try to get a better rate? You know, why didn't you tell them that there's no possibility that you could have ever made a mistake? You never had to redo anything. You never had to retype a deed or redo a document or anything like that. Bunk. You tell the whole truth, and they give you super low rates because they know you are conscious of things and you're doing your best. People who are willing to go into detail about anything on the application get lower rates. And I know that does not make sense to some attorneys. They will fib or something, or they will leave stuff out. No, tell the whole truth. The second, like I say, is to apply to at least 2 companies each year. You can save $1,000 by just filling out some paperwork really well and thoroughly for the attorney, and it's just a insurance application. It's not that super hard, but you do have to be able to go over stuff with the attorney. You know, I saved thousands of dollars, thousands and thousands of dollars, and some cases my employees reminded me and said, well, you know, remember you got a better deal when you applied to 2 companies. And we went through, you know, those things with a fine-tooth comb. Like I say, again, we know for sure that we were right, but if we thought there was any chance somebody would think that I was wrong, I would report it to the company on the renewal. Never got sued, kept getting, they never had to pay a claim, but I kept getting lower rates than other folks because of the detail work. And it's worth, you know, you don't think you're making money by filling out annual applications, but you are. And it also gives you a chance to go over procedures. If you tighten up your procedures according to the renewal application, you're less likely to ever commit malpractice. They'll ask you things like, how do you manage deadlines in detail? And you could do 1 or 2 sentences in there and not tell them much. Fine. They'll still take your money, but they'll take more money. But if you can tell them exactly how you handle deadlines and that you have at least 2 pairs of eyes looking at every deadline and making sure that it's calendared, et cetera, and that you have a qualified paralegal working for you, you save money. And why do you want to know this is because if you save somebody $500 or $1,000 by just filling out an extra application for them based on the information you already have, are they going to be mad at you for having them do a second application? I don't think so. I think they'll think you're a wonderful person to have come up with that. And going through the applications also will help you define competence because it's individually rated. It's not like auto insurance. This is like super specific business insurance. They want to know as much about your law firm as they can without knowing about individual cases, case names or something. You see where I'm coming from? be sort of like if you were insuring a welding shop, you would go through and you would want to make sure each wall that they had was going to withstand the heat. Well, they want to know each procedure you do to ensure competence is going to withstand the heat of the rush world of law, right? Especially things like proofreading, deadlines, knowledge of areas of law, things like that. What do you do if you turn down a case? Do you keep track of the name? If they've talked to the lawyer, does your law firm keep track of the name? Do you send a letter to the person stating that they need to observe the statute of limitations and that the case has been turned down, and keep a copy of it? That will save both the attorney and the insurance company too, because then the person can't come back 2 years later and say, well, I blew my deadline because I went to see that law firm that Danielle or Jessica or Brianna worked at, and they never let me know that they weren't taking the case or that they were, so I just delayed. Duty to report. This does not require that you report negligence, as I read it, but fraud, deceit, dishonesty, or misrepresentation. I think if it's gross negligence that's going to harm the client, I think that it would make sense to find some way to deal with it. Maybe not report to the professional board, but there's got to be some way to deal with it. Law office work may be a major strain, but I don't want you to let it defeat you. Now, I put pressure on you so far, but now I want to take some pressure off. There's a number of things I want you to learn that I do not want you to take on. Too much to do is not your fault. That's the attorney's fault, not yours. There are a number of cases in process at the same time. The attorney may need to be focused on one case, and you may be doing a workup on a different case. Most attorneys have not taken a course in management and supervision. Most have not been managers before being busy lawyers. Organize, communicate, and go home on time. If there's one thing I would advise people employed by lawyers is you are not a lawyer. You're not going to get the rewards of being a lawyer. You're not paid to worry at home or stay at the office. Questions, problems? Does this help? I did have some students appreciate this message last term that I taught this class. Do not take your work home with you if you have, obviously, unless you're working at home, but I suppose I'll have to say, do not take your work past working hours. You're not being paid for it as a paralegal. So if you're working at home, you have to find some way to shut it off. If you end up working at home for a lawyer, my suggestion would be to have make sure have a laptop that's specifically for that. Once that laptop shuts, that used for the lawyer work, once that's shut, your work is done. Well, what if you work for a firm with filing deadlines? I don't know. It's up to you. You have to decide how assertive you are willing to be. I really push my students to become assertive and to say, we'll do this much, this much. This is my problem. If I give you an organized approach, if I organize this for you, then I am going to quit when the working hours are over. Well, yeah, and Jessica brought up, Jamie brought up filing deadlines. You know, that's negotiable, of course, if there's predictable times and you want to do overtime because it's a predictable part of the job or something, that's fine, but that's individually negotiable, I guess, and you have to decide whether they're paying you to do that. And then Jessica is also bringing up her boss procrastinates. Most lawyers procrastinate because lawyers are incentivized to do so, but they never want to hire somebody who procrastinates because they don't need help procrastinating. They need help stopping the procrastination and starting the action. You know, getting stuff done on time is what they need help with. They don't need help with stalling. Stalling, unfortunately, for habits, stalling works for lawyers sometimes. Why does it work? It's because the other lawyer or the insurance company or the other client or so on gets bored and tired of it, and then they will settle just to get something done with. And then they have a bad incentive. But 90% of the time, procrastination hurts your side. But every once in a while, it works, and that creates a bad habit. I only knew one lawyer who never procrastinated, and that lawyer was a collections attorney. And I was hiring him to help me with a collection in another state. He was collecting actually for a relative of mine on a debt, and so I transmitted the debt to the other state to this attorney to collect in the other state because the debtor had moved. Well, fine. But I said, well, would you work on a percentage? Yes, but you'll be sorry. If you hire me by the hour, it's cheaper. I said, well, I don't know. I don't know if you'll be able to collect very much, so I'd like you to just get a percentage of whatever you can collect, and you'll be sorry. And then I was on the phone with him a few times, and he started dictating all of these legal procedures super fast. He knew exactly what to do. It was incredible. And I was just kind of blown away. I thought, boy, we sure should have paid him by the hour, because he could get more done in 10 minutes than most lawyers can get done in an hour. But what I don't want to do is sit and stew about the problem. Write a memo about what's going wrong rather than sit or stew about it. Go home on time. Again, if you're having to work remotely, some of the stuff about going home doesn't work, but you'll have to like close the laptop and say, done for the day, and do your own stuff. But create a file on mistakes and omissions for review. Get help from others. Organize and write. So save, help, organize, write is my memory method, SHOW. So save, help, organize, write. So you create an organized memo of things rather than going in circles and worrying. Yeah. Okay, yeah, and I've got more questions as far as the pressure stuff. and I guess maybe I'm glad I'm hearing this in a way, because maybe I wasn't as bad of a boss as sometimes I thought I was. But one of the things that helps is to have an office meeting. One of the lawyers that I sort of, I won't say mentor, but I sort of advise a little bit. One of the lawyers I advise, I don't charge for it, to friends of mine. But one of the things that happens is that lawyer started having law firm meetings, and it's just a one-person lawyer, but he's got several employees. But a quick meeting in the morning, and then make a list, and then steps, then a who does what, and of course deadlines. That really helps, those things. I was so impressed because I spent quite a bit of time with the lawyer when I took 3 months off in 2017, and wow, neat meetings that they would have. And they didn't spend a lot of time with the meeting, but they would set their schedule for the day, and they talk about deadlines coming up fast. You know, and in some cases, the employee would have physical files and say, well, what about this? What about that? And I got to participate in those. That was really neat. But it's not hyper-organized, but it's organized. Yeah, it's definitely not hyper-organized. One of the problems with some lawyers are hyper-organized, and then they don't know how to use employees, because they're so super hyper-organized. But most lawyers are not hyper-organized. And in some cases, it helps to be somewhat assertive. One of the things that I used to frustrate my employees with is I knew that you could get the mail out, and we still used a lot of snail mail at that time, but we could get the mail out at 4:45 p.m. And finally, they asked me to have a meeting with them, and they just had a 5-minute meeting, and they explained to me that they have several steps before they can mail things. They have to make copies of certain things. They obviously, and there may be a phone call after I give it to them and so on. So what we decided was that initially all they wanted me to do is give it to them by like 4:25 or something like that. I said, well, I'll do one better. Anything I give to you after 4 p.m. doesn't have to be mailed that day. Okay? But that took some assertiveness, but nobody hollered or was rude. They were just very matter of fact about it, okay? And that helped me. Of course, I had told them when I hired them, I said, if you do exactly what I tell you to and nothing more, you wouldn't be a good employee. I'm hiring other people who can think so that you can tell me what you think. If you just agree with me all the time, you're not doing a very good job. And so they said, well, you asked us to tell you if we thought something you're doing is not working, and we don't think that works very well. And I said, well, I trust you. You know what's necessary to do to finish processing it after I give it to you. So, you know, I bent. So I gave it to them based on what they thought was a better deadline for mailing things. But I had asked them before, you know, when I first hired them to be assertive. And so I think that at that point I had, 2 employees, 2 full-timers and 1 part-timer, I think, at that time. But does that story help at all? Yeah. So it's not about getting in someone's face and hollering, but it's also not about being passive and just hoping things get better. SHOW stands for Save, Help, Organize, Right. Okay. So instead of going in circles, you know, same thing with, but I think the best like I say, the best thing that I've seen recently is just that quick morning meeting, and that gave the employees a chance to say, you know, you're going to be taking off this afternoon, so we really need you to give us what we need to do, like this morning, early this morning, and I also am looking at one of these new files, and I can't tell what the deadline is. It's not printed in the file. What's the deadline for our next procedures? And the attorney answered it, and then they felt better. Everybody's stress went down, okay? The paralegal in this week's story is in a total mess. There's certainly a risk in defying the orders of a supervising attorney. But when you look at the situation, it may be necessary. If you took my advice on finding points of disagreement with authority, you will get this. The actual rules established that are enforceable at the time of the problem count most. You want to look at the ethical rules in the state and look below those rules in Lexis. There are a lot of hints in the lessons, such as when a paralegal should report. Those will not be covered in primary sources like state rules. And again, if you spend too many hours second-guessing yourself, similar to what I told you for working for a lawyer, if you're going in circles, stop. Set a timer. When it goes off, spend 5 minutes proofreading and turn it in. If you think you're wrong and that the opposite answer would be a good answer, type both. If you hesitate between two answers to a question, type them both and for a written assignment. Questions or problems with that? Well, not if you get in the habit of it. It's not going to be stressful to type both. The only time it's super stressful is if those of my students that are not typists, have not really worked on typing. But you're just putting that which you're doing in circles, you're putting it in writing, and then it becomes, I think almost 100% of the time, it becomes less stressful when you put it on the page. And you say, hey, professor, or hey, boss, I am stuck between these two alternatives. There's some ideas that fit, and some of the facts fit this answer, and some of the facts fit this, and some of the laws I see seem to fit this answer and fit this. So I'm going to give you both. I would like you to expand your thinking and put it on the page. Other teachers will help you in compressing it down. Learn both skills. Which of these skills do I teach? A, B, C, or D? Yeah, you're right. Does that mean that editing down to the essentials is not a good skill? No. B is a great skill. It's just not what I teach. Okay? I want you to do both, but in my class, expansion, I don't mind skimming through extra work to get the nuggets that I'm looking for. That's fine. Give a main answer followed by other possible answers. Expand your thinking. Go ahead. It's something that you get to do in school, expanding. At work, I realize that mostly it's rush work. They want, they may want it in short form, but at work, most of you are going to have to keep the alternatives in your own notes. But it depends on who you work for. I still think you should type it out some way, because they may ask you, well, where'd you come up with that? And then you can say, well, I've got notes on it. If you want the other answer, I can pop up with it. I can get it for you in 5 minutes. I just have to go to my notes. Okay? I think that they would be happy with you, and a lot of them, like I say, they want something short. That's fine, but then if they reject it, you're ready to go with another option. And this is just a rhetorical question, not expecting you to answer it. This is not needed now. And here is something that when you see attorney problems that are clearly leading to mismanagement, ignore the problem. I don't agree with that. I think most of you are too conscientious to do that. Some of you are going to do B, but I want you to break the habit. This is not something you do. Otherwise, you should be in a different field. If you're going to take the problem home, unless they want to hire you for a major corporation and pay you an executive salary, don't do B. It's not worth it. What you do for a typical paralegal job or even a top paralegal job in a law firm is organize file matters, write about it. So you've organized it, and then leave it on someone else's desk and go home. That is supposed to be, paralegal work should be less stressful than being a lawyer, because you should not be the final say in the office. It should be able to get onto somebody else's desk and it'd be their problem once you've organized it and written about it, okay? You're asked to reveal a professional responsibility issue. You should ignore both methods and knowledge from class and do a quick check of the rules without cross-referencing. Oh, that's bunk. I want you to learn how to cross-reference. Use what, and I'll reject C too. Even if I told you something that was correct from your home state, it may have changed. So don't just use my answers. Use B. Use thoroughness and your own research and critical thinking. So yes, you can trust that I'm doing my best, but 5 years from now, the exact thing that I told you or the exact thing I may have helped you find in Lexis may not be the final answer anymore, okay? And again, show, save help, organize, right. And so show and tell, that's the answer this week. Okay? critical thinking in Rasmussen College is critically important individual thinking. It's not just reviewing somebody else's thinking. The true mess involved, I guess, I don't know if I went into enough detail in it. I don't know if you've even looked at it. I probably, I've got too much stuff available here. But anyway, take a look at this difficult assignment. I think most of it, you know what's wrong with these things, but if you run into trouble with it, I guess just call me. And it gives you a lot of clues: unauthorized practice, fee setting, conflicts of interest, competence, and so on. So a lot of it you know already, but I still want you to give sources for the stuff you already know. And of course, the new stuff is really the duty to report. And then recommendation for course of action, which you normally wouldn't do as paralegal action, but I still want you to know the consequences, such as suspension, things like that. Should the attorney be suspended, disbarred, things like that. Other possible is the attorney could be required, not suspended, but placed under supervised practice. Have you ever heard of supervised practice? One attorney not too far from my area, I think it was before I practiced law, but was placed on supervised practice. So another attorney reviews each case and the attorney's actions. It's very embarrassing, I guess, but they tend to pick somebody. They usually can pick their own attorney to help, but act as attorney, well, with another attorney helping. A suspended attorney normally has to stop practicing law for that period of time. Yeah, maybe. Well, the supervised practice would be kind of like probation, but suspension means basically they cannot be a lawyer for that period of time. And generally cannot act at all in a law office. Because they suspect that the person would still be an attorney, even though they say they're just doing clerical work at the law office or something like that. And normally they have to reapply or apply to be restored to practice. And normally, yeah, it is kind of like probation. And then normally, sometimes they may have to retake the ethics exam. And they may have to pay the cost of the professional board investigation. So yeah, there's a lot of consequences there. What they really need is Mickey from the old Rocky movies. Have you ever watched the old Rocky movies? Rocky gets trained by this tough ex-fighter. I can do the voice. Yeah, Rocky was my wife says it'll hurt my singing voice. I don't know, but I do a pretty good Mickey. But Rocky says, how come you took away my locker? Yeah, you put me on Skid Row. You took away my locker. My stuff is bagged and hung. Well, he had a locker, of course, but he got demoted in the gym to where he was one of the fighters that didn't even have a locker anymore. You know, just got to hang his stuff on a hook with a bag. That's all he got to do then. It says, "How come? You want to know?" "Yeah, tell me, Mickey." "You really want to know?" "Yeah, tell me." "'Cause you're a bum. You work for a two-bit leg breaker. You're a bum." and, and then of course Rocky did straighten up and and actually start training decently and so on. But the attorney placed on suspension has been cut down to size and of course has to be more or less retrained. Okay. I don't know if that came out. Did I hurt your ears? I better stop recording here.